After the discovery of the New World, the Spanish had, by the 1520s, settled in many Caribbean islands and established New Spain, which spread from Panama to central Mexico. It was from here that the Spanish heard news of a gold-rich territory to the south. This was the Incan Empire, an empire which had emerged in the 15th century when the Kingdom of Cusco conquered their neighbouring kingdoms. 3 expeditions to discover the lands were launched from 1522 to 1526, but they didn't make it further south in the coast of Ecuador. However, Francisco Pizarro, the leader of 2 of these expeditions, did enter Incan territory and brought smallpox to the region. Undeterred by his failures, Pizarro travelled to Spain with llamas, natives and gold, and convinced King Charles I to authorize another expedition. He returned to Panama with 180 men, including his brothers, and in 1531 landed near Tumbes, and it was here that he learned that the Incan Empire was in a chaotic state. Since his last expedition, Emperor Huayna Capac and his eldest son had both caught smallpox and died. So the emperor's other sons, both struggling for power, brought the empire into civil war. Nevertheless, Pizarro waited until reinforcements led by Hernando de Soto arrived before travelling south in May 1532. Meanwhile, in the Incan Civil War, Atahualpa had emerged victorious in battle over his brother in the city of Cajamarca. So the Spanish turned inland and travelled to meet the emperor with their remaining 168 men, 12 arquebuses and 4 cannons. On the 16th of November, Atahualpa, who was staying in camp outside the city, left most of his army outside as he entered with around 7,000 unarmed men to meet Pizarro. Pizarro, on the other hand, intended to capture the emperor like Cortes did in Mexico, so had positioned troops for an ambush and sent a friar to meet the emperor. The emperor reportedly refused to convert to Christianity and threw the holy book to the ground. This is when the order to attack was given and Spanish cavalry and guns slaughtered around 2,000 of the Incas while the emperor was taken prisoner. The well-armed and experienced fighters outside the city, who outnumbered the Spanish by about 400 to 1, fled in panic. With Atahualpa as prisoner, the Spanish ordered a large amount of gold to pay his ransom, so large that it took months for it to be supplied. Atahualpa, however, was still able to govern his empire to some extent. For instance, he ordered that his rival brother Huascar be killed, allowing his own generals to take Cusco, the most important city in the empire. In the spring of 1533, the Incas had met the Spanish demands, and the Spanish began dividing gold amongst themselves. Regardless, due to rumours, they executed Atahualpa in August. Then, to appease the Incans and gain support, they promised to appoint his younger brother, Manco Inca Yupanqui, as puppet emperor. With more reinforcements, the conquistadors marched on Cusco. En route, they gained the support of thousands of natives who lived unhappily under Incan rule, and together they took the city of November. Elsewhere, 2 great Incan generals were killed in quick succession. Quizquiz, who fled Cusco, was killed by his own mutinous soldiers, and Ruminahue, who led a rebellion in the north, was killed by the Spanish. So, with no leaders for the rebellions and a new puppet emperor, New Castile was established and Lima was founded as its capital. But Conquistador Diego de Almagro, who had been promised land in the south, led hundreds of troops to Chile hoping to establish New Toledo. So, the emperor Manco Inca, who had been poorly treated by the Spanish, used this opportunity to flee Cusco and launch his own rebellion in 1536. He gathered over 100,000 troops and laid siege to the city. The Spanish and their native allies held out for 10 months and were only rescued by Almagro, who had returned from his failed expedition in Chile. Manco Inca fled into the mountains and set up a new state in Vilcabamba. However, when Almagro broke the siege, he used the opportunity to push for power and imprisoned 2 of Francisco Pizarro's brothers, thus starting a civil war between the Pizarros and Almagros. Almagro was killed in 1538, Francisco Pizarro in 1541, and Almagro's son in 1542. But before Pizarro died, he granted Pedro de Valdivia the right to conquer modern-day Chile. He succeeded where Almagro failed and expanded Spanish territory in South America. To end the infighting amongst the conquistadors, the Spanish government set up the Viceroyalty of Peru, sent in new governors, and introduced the new laws aimed at limiting the exploitation of the locals. This only prompted Gonzalo Pizarro, Francisco's brother, to rebel against the Spanish government, but he too was killed in 1546, ending the rebellions in Peru. In the following decades, the Spanish continued to expand their holdings in South America, but the Incas still ruled in Vilcabamba, and it wasn't until Francisco de Toledo was appointed viceroy over 2 decades later that the Spanish really challenged their position. In 1572, Toledo's armies marched into Vilcabamba, captured the emperor Tupac Amaru, and had him executed, ending the Incan Empire forever.